Not one, but two vaccines for a deadly disease in a single week. We live in amazing times. I'm Scott Ott with Stephen Green and Bill Whittle, and this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, I continue to be astounded at some of the advances that we get to see in my very own lifetime. I was raised by a man who was born at a time when air travel was virtually unknown and got to see rockets go to the moon. And now I'm living at a time when a rocket can land on its tail in the middle of an ocean on a bobbing barge. At the same time this year, after seeing dozens of those landings happen, I'm seeing two vaccines for a deadly disease we didn't even know about before early this year, now already being released to the public. I met a guy yesterday, Stephen Green, who works at a local hospital, and said that he just got the email yesterday that he was scheduled today, as we record this, on Tuesday the 15th, to receive his vaccination. I believe it's the Pfizer vaccine for COVID-19. Steve, are we now finally getting to live in the era that we were promised back in the 1960s? Not that you would know anything about the 1960s.
I'm sorry, Scott, you cut out there for a moment, and I missed the last part of your question right before the 60s.
I was just saying, has the promised future finally arrived?
Well, not until I get my flying car, no. I want the full Jetsons experience. I want the robot maid. I'm not talking about the silly round little vacuum like I've got. No, I want Rosie, the robot maid. I want the flying car. I want all of it. That said, there is a particular American genius for getting stuff done when you don't have a whole lot of red tape in our way and you just let us go out and do what we were meant to do. Couple of examples of this from World War II spring to my mind, just because I've been reading a bunch of World War II history books lately, or maybe still would be the better word. But one of them came from Band of Brothers, which love the book, rewatching the miniseries right now. And when American GIs are facing German POWs and seeing the kind of conditions that the Germans were fighting in, where most of their artillery was drawn by horses, and pretty much every damn American had his own Jeep. Not really, I'm exaggerating. Yeah. But one of our paratroopers is shouting, "You dragged us halfway across the world to fight you with horses? We've got Chevrolet, we've got General Motors." And he's just furious that the Germans would try and take on the entire world like this, when part of the entire world is the United States that can produce 2.5-ton trucks faster than Germans can breed horses. We're really good at this stuff when you get out of our way. The other example is from the other side of the world during World War II, when we were getting to 1944 in the Marianas Campaign against Imperial Japan. If, say, a Hellcat landed on a carrier and was shot up and needed some repairs, a lot of the times the Navy crews would just push the damn thing overboard, because back in the States we were producing Hellcats by the thousands, and it was cheaper and faster just to get a new one than it was to try and fix the one that got shot up. Meanwhile, Japan didn't even have enough fuel to train their pilots to fly properly anymore. This is what happens when you've got America unbridled. Now, World War II is clearly an outlandish example maybe to use in this case. It was a global war after all, but this is kind of a global war. It's a pandemic. It means it's a global outbreak of disease. And it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me, knowing history the way I do, that America would produce not one, but two vaccines, do it in record time, and sure enough, we're going to produce them in record quantities too.
And Bill Whittle, that's really the second part of my amazement at this, is the idea that we could create this sort of new product in this very short window of time. That's phenomenal in itself. But then the whole business logistics of it, the distribution systems, and as we were hearing that the FDA was on the cusp of granting emergency approval status to the Pfizer vaccine, and then what was the other one called, the Moderna vaccine or something like that, as they were in the process of doing that, that, it was like the trucks were idling. They were already full of vials of these vaccines that were about to go around the country. And as soon as that authorization came down, it was like the driver could punch the pedal and start delivering them. The manpower and the whole computerized systems and the ability to keep this vaccine at the ideal temperature and the protocols for when you open the container and how quickly you have to close the container and how quickly it has to be in a person. All of that stuff gets developed literally, to quote a phrase, at Operation Warp Speed. Now, Bill, I don't know what the technical specifications of warp speed are, but I think I'm beginning to see it, and I'm sure you do know. What do you think of this magnificent effort?
It's not a scientific achievement so much as it's a political achievement. And there's one person responsible for these vaccines being available in the space of less than a year, and there's one person responsible for having them on trucks ready to go. And we all know who that person is. And that person was cheated out of office a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So that's his reward. Now Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take credit for the vaccine. They'll take credit for the economic recovery that occurs when you're no longer locked down for this virus that was produced by the Communist Party of China in their Wuhan research lab. So that's my take on it. I hope I know that the people who are going to appreciate what Donald Trump did by getting the mass of the federal bureaucracy out of the way, by moving this enormous weight, just this mountain of inertia that had to be moved in order to get these things out to people quickly enough. The people who understand that he did that will continue to be grateful to him for it, and the people that believe that he botched the recovery and so on will be able to go out into the world without fear of dying, thanks to what Orange Man did politically. The ability of our science and our industry to produce these things has always been astonishing and mind-boggling. We've always been handicapped by the red tape of the politics and the bureaucracy and the regulations and so on. And one person got those things out of the way. One person got those vaccines to us. I think both those vaccines belong to Donald Trump in the same way that the Salk vaccine belonged to Linus Salk. Not Linus Salk. I'm thinking Linus Pauling.
Jonas, I think.
Yep. I was thinking of Linus Pauling. No, these are Donald Trump's vaccines, and they're there now because of all of the government bureaucracy inertia he cut out of the way on purpose personally, and that is a lasting achievement. And I am looking forward to seeing whether or not all of the plexiglass dividers come down. That's what I'm going to be looking for. When this vaccine has been spread throughout the public and actual immunity is here, I'm going to see whether the 6 feet separation signs come down. I'm going to see if all of the glass partitions come down. I'm going to see if any of this stuff comes down. I can tell you what the inclination on the part of politicians will be. So we'll either go back to normal or we won't. But in any event, there's going to be a lot of people alive who wouldn't be otherwise, thanks to what this man did. And it makes me sick to my stomach to think that that's his reward for it, because it was clearly an act of political will that made this happen and nothing else.
You know, one of the amazing things about this great nation is that we really don't get to see the insides of the machine. We kind of get an external view of outcomes as things happen, but we have no idea the kind of day-to-day labor that goes into making these accomplishments happen. You know, the long nights at the laboratory, the extra shifts worked at a factory where they have to set up a completely new line of equipment or set up a set of protocols that make sure that this vial of vaccine can not only get out of the laboratory through the factory onto the truck at the location where it's going to be administered, but there not be spoiled in the process because it has to be maintained at a certain temperature, and all of the science and industry that goes behind making this happen is something that I think we need to pause every once in a while and just frickin' marvel at. I think there's so much going on in the world today today that can be discouraging, but if my grandfather had heard that, somebody got the idea, somebody found out about polio in January or February and developed a vaccine for it by October and had it injected into people by December of the self-same year, it would have completely blown his mind. I grew up in the household with that guy who grew up on a dairy farm and lived through the Great Depression, and I get to see in a couple of weeks or months or whatever it takes to get down to sort of relatively lower risk people like me. No, I'm not as old as I look. Although I'm rich with comorbidities, the fact that I get to witness this kind of miraculous achievement, not just in the realm of science, but also of the technology and industry that delivers that science to your doorstep, so to speak, is magnificent. I think there are a lot of people who have covered themselves in glory in this process. President Trump being prime among them, the guy who was willing to say, yes, that the federal bureaucracy doesn't have to move at a snail's pace at all times, that actually we can goose this thing and get it moving forward and get a process in place that will actually save people's lives. Great tribute to the president's leadership on that. But Big Pharma. How many times have we heard criticisms of Big Pharma? Oh, those people, they don't care about anything but money. They're just trying to jack up the cost of prescription drugs. A lot of your neighbors work for Big Pharma. A lot of your neighbors are out there trying to save people's lives and make their lives more tolerable. We have no idea what it was like to grow up even 100 years ago in this country with the misery of various diseases, many of which would kill you in childhood, that we don't even think about anymore. And then just the great American manufacturing machine and distribution channels that have made it possible to do this. Everything down to the truck driver who is, running those long hauls to get from, Michigan to Dallas or wherever they're going to deliver this stuff. If you're a praying person, maybe now's the time to get down on your knees and thank God that you were born at this time in this place. No matter how bad things have been this year, in hindsight, it will have seemed for most of us as a mild inconvenience. For those of us who mourn, obviously a deeper tragedy, but for all of us, we should look back on awe and realize that we were able to get through something by pulling together and by building on an infrastructure that has been in place for many years and will continue to make this nation the greatest nation on earth. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching Right Angle.